How many people affected? With that understanding, Table 1.2 shows an overview of the total population in camps in Africa in authoritarian government countries combined with the total population in camps in Africa in non-authoritarian government countries from 2007 to 2014. Detailed information for each chart is in the appendix. The previously determined authoritarian countries in Africa which had POC camps from 2007 to 2014 again served as the basis for examination of the population and country scope of the issue. UN organization data regarding national populations and POC populations disaggregated by type of POC were combined to determine what portion of a country's population were POCs and would therefore be most directly affected by EIE EEPs. Since the referenced UN organization data did not specify how the POC populations as a percentage of the country population were determined, Figure 1.3 shows the results of two methods. The Cromer percentage was determined by dividing the total aggregated POC populations by the total country populations. The Ch1c percentage was determined by adding each country's POC population to the country population, then dividing by the country population. As a summary of both the authoritarian group of countries and the non-authoritarian group of countries, the Ch1c percentages were averaged for the final percentage. The data regarding persons of concern as a percentage of the country's population shows the POCs are generally below 7% of the hosting nation population. Every year, whether using Cromer, Ch1c, or average, there is enough of a difference between authoritarian and non-authoritarian governments to warrant further research focused on authoritarian governments. The extent of EIE in numeric terms is shown in Table 1.2 to provide a contextual approximation of the geographic, political, and population scope of involvement. Data compiled from UNHCR databases from 2007 to 2014 was culled from annual reports and consolidated to show the number of refugee camps and centers, both in Africa and around the world, during the years for which data was not only available, but able to be readily manipulated. Camps and centers, hereafter referred to as camps, were focused on as planned and managed settlements directly under UNHCR control, as opposed to attempting to track smaller NGO and civil society organization CSO operations, which may or may not be officially registered with the respective country or with the UNHCR. The existing data groups were then compiled to show what would normally be school-aged children by combining the UNHCR percentage of 5 to 11-year-olds and the percentage of 11 to 17-year-olds, then converting that percentage to a number based on the total number of refugees in all African camps. Finally, to depict the range of school-aged youths in African camps, Table 1.2 shows the smallest and largest percentage of youths in all the African camps during the stated years. The resulting data shows between 102 and 140 refugee camps averaged nearly 40% of their populations being between 5 and 17 years old from 2007 to 2014. In addition to the estimated number of refugee children in the targeted age range, Figure 1.4 shows the percentage of GDP estimated for refugee education by cross-referencing the 11 countries of interest with the available information from UNHCR on the cost of support to refugees. UNHCR has not disaggregated the cost of refugee education from overall refugee funding. Figure 1.4 shows the aggregated percentages both with and without Zimbabwe as the significant outlier in 2009. UNHCR provided no information addressing the Zimbabwe data anomaly. Both sets of tables and graphics show a decrease in national spending on refugees. Data for Figure 1.6 was altered from the data provided by UNHCR as a notional normalization of the data by averaging the previous and subsequent years. The overall effect on the data still shows an increase in the aggregated country data and an increase in the graph line, although the spike is considerably decreased as compared to Figure 1.4 and Figure 1.5. Another point regarding the scope of the problem is the organizations involved in providing education in emergencies, specifically those organizations which provide education in refugee camps or work with national governments to build national government education planning and development capability. The leading organization for this sector is the Interagency Network for Education in Emergencies, INEE, which was established in 2000 to connect EIE practitioners and to provide a repository for best practices which would be accessible to governments, NGOs, academics, and practitioners. The INEE list of members and member organizations shows universities, research centers, think tanks, government development organizations, civil society organizations, and faith-based organizations, FBOs, which work at varying levels in countries around the world. This study lists and refers to only the INEE members, which either directly provide education or government technical assistance, or INEE members which logically would contract for education or technical assistance. The organization designations are listed in Appendix A as they are listed in the INEE Self-Identification Database. These designations may differ from academic or other organization definitions. This study also addresses INEE directly as one of the projected respondent organizations. As an additional reference, the Yearbook of International Organizations was consulted specifically for organizations focused on education. After separating out organizations which did not have current data, organizations which specifically list a focus on a non-African region of the world, and other similar broad categories, 7,340 organizations remained. After culling again for such entities as purely research organizations, but including government-sponsored organizations, 212 organizations remained. However, organizations such as UNESCO and CARE were not included in the 212. After determining both the YIO and the INEE databases are based on individual organizations' self-identification, understanding the EIE organization designations was resolved by simply comparing the organization's self-designation list in each resource. The result is that both the YIO and the INEE databases are fairly consistent in how organizations are designated. Also, regarding policy analysis, the specificity of the available data is large and somewhat fluid on both organizations and camps. Attempting to get exact data on the EIE efforts and plans for each organization specific to each camp in Africa would likely prove to be an entirely separate project of marginal benefit to the immediate research questions. However, the likely EEPs were added to the list of targeted study respondents. The point of adding the organizations was an attempt to gain a direct understanding of whether a transition plan exists, potentially gaining access to the existing plans, and potentially adding practitioner organizations as study respondents to increase first-hand experiential data. Data to determine exactly how many and which camps offered any type of education program is significantly more involved because the data is not readily available from UNHCR, UNESCO, UNICEF, the African Union, Human Rights Watch, ReliefWeb, or similar organizations. Many camps have individual fact sheets available through these named organizations. However, for the purpose of establishing the need for and validity of the proposed research, the body of information and the logic behind it presented in this proposal is suggested to be sufficient.